Welcome to Reputation Room. I'm Andy Hallmark. Today, we're talking about a question that comes up all the time in communications and marketing. When should an organization use PR? When should it use advertising? And when do you need the two working together? A lot of leaders think they need visibility, but visibility is not always the real problem. Sometimes they need trust, sometimes they need reach, sometimes they need clarity, and sometimes they need to explain something complicated. Sometimes they need to say the right thing to the right people at the right time. My guest today is Jon Miller, Vice President of Client Service at Trilix. Jon has spent more than 30 years helping organizations think through advertising, messaging, brand management, customer engagement, and client strategy. His own profile on LinkedIn says that he grew up on a dairy farm where early mornings, limited resources, and real problems taught him to figure things out. I love that, by the way. That feels like a pretty good foundation for agency life. So, Jon, welcome to the Reputation Room.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you having me. It's nice to be included in your mix of guests.
Thanks, man. So you've said in the past that the real work is earning enough trust that clients will tell you what is really going on. I want to explore that. Why is that so important before you can recommend PR, advertising, marketing, or anything else?
Well, at the end of the day, we're professionals in a professional service business, and you wouldn't go into your doctor or your attorney or your accountant and tell half the story or only describe part of your symptoms or what have you. And so
Well, you
we
might
have,
at your doctor these days. I do that sometimes.
well, yeah, or you might chat GPT everything and then go in and tell
Exactly.
him what the diagnosis is.
Exactly.
But with trust comes transparency, and with trust comes honesty. And, you can be very honest, but not be transparent. And you
Yeah.
can be, transparent and not fully honest. So the combination of the two is really the power. And you and I both know and have both run into situations where we kind of have half the story or two-thirds of the story. We give recommendations based on our best thinking, and the recommendations aren't right because we frankly didn't know the full story. So having that trust and trying to get that full story day
Yeah.
one is, I think, more critical than ever right now.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't give good advice, I don't think, when you don't know the real problem. But that
Mm.
leads to a question. What do you see leaders sometimes hold back early on from an agency?
It's a great question, and a lot of it depends, I think, on where they are in their organization. The executive might not have a full lay of the land themselves,
No, that's
or
true.
their measure of success doesn't align with the businesses. It's not always about selling more widgets. It's I need to prove I'm really good at this so I get a promotion, or I'm trying to protect headcount, or I'm trying to show up another department, or whatever it is. And so you walk in thinking, oh, this is very simple. They're trying to sell more. And in reality, it's very disconnected from why you're sitting in the room and the expertise that you bring.
Yeah, I think we do make a mistake on the agency side sometimes of thinking of corporations as a monolith or even
Yeah.
large government agencies, and they're just not that way, are they?
No, I mean, they're filled with people, and
Yeah.
people are about themselves. You're not dealing with a nonprofit where, in theory, there's a lot of mission alignment or a lot of folks who are there for a common good. In a company, everybody has different success measures and different needs and different approaches. And even within the same company, depending on who you're talking to or whose budget you're pulling from or what have you, you could have
Yeah.
markedly different outcomes and different success measures. And, you see that all the time in PR and media relations and messaging. I see it all the time in advertising and marketing and in general comms.
That's a good segue. I think you and I, before we got into this a couple days ago, we were talking about this. We
Mhm.
probably should define things a little bit before we get into this discussion any further because people throw around the word PR and advertising and marketing, and they throw them around, I think, interchangeably often, but they're not
Yeah.
that way. They overlap, but they don't always do the same job. So, in your expertise area, how do you define advertising, marketing, PR, and the differences between them?
That's changed over the years because I think the definitions are getting muddier and muddier. But in general, I would say it comes down to how you spend your money. In PR, you spend your money trying to convince people to agree with you, to pay attention to you, to understand you. And the difference between that and advertising is that in advertising, you're paying for volume, you're paying for
Yeah.
reach. Uh,
Yep.
so it's less personal. You have more control. You can have a higher, volume and a bigger reach, but you can't really control the outcomes nearly as well as you can try to control the outputs with PR. And so it's really about, are you paying to speak loudly and cover a lot of ground, or are you paying to try to reach people on a more personal and maybe more direct manner? Is at least how I see it.
No, I think that's we were talking tactically also within there. Does this tactic is that PR now? Is this
Yeah.
lean into advertising? Where do influencers sit? Having that conversation I think is interesting also. And I think there's some things like influencers and how we use social now that are so different than how we did, even 5 years ago.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it'll look completely different 5 years from
Yeah.
now.
No, I agree.
Ultimately, you open talking about trust. I think it comes down to trust on the back end of it too. Brands or companies or products or candidates or people or whomever are all just wanting trust. And
Right.
so anymore, it is who is most effective and who can most efficiently earn trust, whether it's through advertising or PR or social or, any number of different tactics. What is the fastest and then most sustainable way to get trust?
When a client says to you, "We need to get our name out there," what do you hear? And what do you try to find out before you recommend a campaign?
I hear a symptom. I hear an inkling of what they think they see their finish line as, but I don't see anything actionable there. So that really just starts a long, long list of questions. What do you mean by that? How would you want that measured? Who do you want to know your name and why do you want them to know your name? And what do you assume they will think when they do know your name?
But
You
you
know?
ever but do you ever find though that clients sometimes I agree with you, that is but when you go down this list of questions, I feel like sometimes clients are like, "Look, man, I don't wanna answer your questions, okay? I
Mhm.
just want you to go do the thing."
Yeah.
And yet if
Oh
we
yeah.
don't ask the questions, we can't do the thing. Do you ever find this true as well?
It's not that they're afraid of the questions, they're afraid of their ability to give the answers. They
Yeah,
might not know, they might not understand, they
yeah.
might have competing directives and all sorts of things floating around. And also, it's sometimes hard for a client to say, "I don't know." "I don't know" is a very valid response to a lot
Yes,
of questions.
it is.
And I think, you and I have both been in rooms where our outcomes would have been significantly better if the client had just looked us in the eye and said, "I don't know. Let's figure this out together."
Yeah, yeah. Let's drill down a little bit on advertising and PR. I spent most of my career in PR, dabbled in
Mhm.
advertising. You spent most of your career in advertising.
Dabbled in PR.
You've probably done more than dabbled in PR, but you still, I would say it that way. Let's start with this question. When is PR the better answer than advertising?
Boy.
You know?
No, it's a great question, and I think there's no set answer, but in general, I would say PR is better when you have a smaller, more concentrated audience. When you have an audience that, if you're in the technical world or B2B or academia or medicine, and your audience is highly informed, highly engaged, and very much aware of either your product or your operating environment, then I think PR matters because those are high touch conversions. Those are
Right.
relationship and trust based conversions. If I'm trying to sell a consumer product, if I'm Coca-Cola, well, that's a bulk advertising play. I just want everybody to see me all the time. because the product itself is what the product is and people know what to expect. So it's just reminding them that I'm out there.
And I think we've done ourselves a disservice a little bit on the PR side in the numbers game.
Mm,
For a long time, PR was just recognized as this is valuable. I got a placement in this publication. I know that this person who's the decision maker reads that publication.
yeah.
There's value there, right?
Yeah.
Because we're trying to get that message across. And then we went this period where we were like, I can give you all the metrics. I can tell you the impressions, and they were made up numbers, by the way, by,
Oh, sure.
Cision, Cision and Meltwater and people like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And so we went through this period where we were like, I'm going to try to have the same type of metrics that advertising has. And it's not possible.
No, no.
But I'm not we got stuck in that. I'm really not sure why we got stuck in that for a while.
Well, I think a lot of it was the clients driving it. I mean, everybody bemoans the MBAs, but it's what's happened everywhere. The numbers drive the strategy, the numbers drive the outcomes, and the numbers drive the judgment and the decision
Mm,
making. Your strength is a PR practitioner and is a professional messenger and a professional communicator is in the subtleties. You can walk in with the sledgehammer, but you get much farther with a little pick.
yeah, that's right.
And so that's that, the measurements are so difficult. And that's why, pulling it back to trust, there has to be trust in the fact that, listen, Andy knows the reality of what's going on here. I trust Andy to do the right thing. I'm going to talk to Andy about results annually, not quarterly or not
Mm,
monthly or not weekly. Now, it might be a different conversation with John because he could provide digital numbers
that's
daily.
right. That's right.
You you know, you shouldn't look at them daily, but he could provide them daily. But it's kind of the well-balanced breakfast approach where, you can have some sugary cereal if you have a piece of fruit with it, and it's just finding that combination that works.
So let's flip it around then. So when is advertising clearly the better tool? And, just as a follow-up to that, can advertising create that trust you mentioned, or can it only reinforce trust that had to be earned someplace else?
I will take the easy one first. I think advertising is best when you have to reach a volume of people and the messaging is fairly straightforward. Buy this, do this, think this, take this action.
Mhm.
Where, you know, PR is best with subtleties. And then when you think about whether advertising can create trust or not, I don't think the actual act of advertising can. It's what you say in the advertising and whether it is really cohesive with everything else you're putting out there, whether it matches the reality of your audience, whether it takes a stand and has a point of view that is real and defensible. And then it comes down to consistency. Have you been saying the same thing for long enough that people start to really believe that that's where you're coming from? I don't know that advertising in a vacuum can create trust. It can partner with PR and help
Yeah.
earn trust. But, you know, audiences are so fragmented these days and
Mm,
everybody has their own arbiter of truth. And so the whole concept of trust is very fluid these days.
yep.
And so are you going to believe a 30-second spot or a digital ad you see? Or are you going to believe this influencer or this reporter or this person who doesn't really seem to have any motive or skin in the game telling you, the same thing?
But I will say though, I found still amazingly, and I would say I'm part of the jaded class, that sometimes I'll watch an ad that's well done and presents a cogent argument, and I say to myself, that is interesting, right?
Sure. Absolutely. And that's the messaging. And that's why Super Bowl ads are important because everybody swings for the fences and they make their best argument. They do their
Mhm.
coolest creative. They try their absolute hardest.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the goal is to just make you go, huh, well, yeah, okay.
Right.
Maybe if they're lucky, you'll visit a website or pick up the phone or, pick up a product next time you're in the store, but they stopped you for that half a second and you got some consideration or they got some consideration from you, and that's what that's about.
Uh, I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk cost at least a little bit here.
Oh,
I mean
absolutely.
I mean, advertising campaigns can be everything from a small digital buy
Mhm.
to, everything,
Millions.
right? Out of
Yeah.
home and everything else. And I found, because I often get to partner with people like you who are experts at it, that, if I have a client who wants to advertise and they say, "Hey, I wanna really be seen in these 6 cities talking about this topic," whatever it might be. And then I say, "Oh, okay, that's cool. We can do that." That's gonna be $500,000. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh my
Mhm.
god, I don't wanna do that. What can you do for $5,000?" I'm like, "Well, these are not the same things."
No.
How I mean, how do you deal with what I find is often unrealistic expectations on the money side coming in, and how do you help level set people so they can have success, but not just sticker shock the whole time?
Well, I think it comes down to being able to reframe what success looks like. In
Mm,
that case, let's say 6 cities. Well, you could do 2 cities very well with your budget. You could do 4 cities kinda well. You can't really do 6 cities at all. And giving them choices because, not every city is of the same importance, and not
right.
every opportunity is of the same importance. So, do we go narrow and deep with tactics? Do we reduce geography? Do we reduce audiences? What do we do? But, you know, it it's just giving them kind of the option of saying, "Listen, we can accomplish this well, or we can accomplish nothing poorly, and let's kinda work through it."
You know, flipping from PR or advertising to if you think about integrated campaigns and how those work,
Yeah.
instead of just a PR plan, an ad buy, a website update, and some social all happening at the same time, what goes into making an integrated campaign truly integrated? Even if you're using multiple agencies or, however it might be.
Uh, Communication and shared success measures, I think, are the big thing. I run into this all the time where different shops, same client, same, kind of client structure, but different success measures and different marching orders.
Mm,
And, you know, all of these things can work together really well. You need to have coordination, you need to have transparency, and you need to have an agreed upon finish line. And then it does help. And I know sometimes it feels very strange. Pull everybody into the room, pull all the shops into the same room, show
yeah,
everybody everything. You know, you don't have to get into, confidential contract matters or anything like that, but it would be very helpful for me to know that, Andy is spending a week in Charlotte pitching these stories,
that's right.
and can media come over top and support that? Or can I
Right.
soften the ground beforehand? Or, whatever. So you and I can align and work together. That's where the success really happens.
If you were to put a percentage on it, I know this is arbitrary, so bear with it, okay? If you're gonna put a percentage on it and you were gonna say how many campaigns are just advertising you do, just PR or integrated, what percentage is integrated sitting at?
For Trilix, probably a third.
Yeah.
You know, our client base is a lot of B2B or
Yep.
B2B to C. And so PR for us is not oftentimes, the retail PR that
Yeah.
you might think it is. And so for us, depending on the client, I would say a third.
As it leads towards what's happening in the future with advertising, with integrated campaigns, where do you see things going that you maybe never thought that they would be going when it comes to your craft?
I'm seeing this, and you are as well, this whole shift away from SEO towards the AI generated search and what that means for presentation of information and, you know, the carrying of
Yes.
coordinated messages across all the platforms and things like that. That's the idea that creative or messaging was tactic specific, I think is starting to erode a little bit, and I think it is really how do we take a single message and present it in layers. You might get just the frosting of the cake with this tactic, but this tactic is the entire cake and it's in depth. So figuring that out and figuring out kind of what the content stack looks like is
Mm,
is ever evolving. And then frankly, the role of advertising and PR in the content stack and thinking of the whole thing as a holistic kind of organism, that's new. And that's only going to continue. And I don't know if anybody's figured it out yet
right.
because it feels like the rules change every week. But
Right.
the I think advertising and PR and kind of web and digital and interactive and comms and social and all that, they're coming together. They're not splitting apart.
No, I agree. I'm curious, just to push this further.
Mm.
I are these supposed to be in one agency, or should these be? I mean, I've
Yeah.
always held this opinion, and I don't know if it's a true opinion, but it's mine. Okay, I've always felt like, as a PR firm, which is what my firm is, we dabble in advertising because we have to. Okay, we
Yeah.
dabble in social, we dabble in digital placement, all kind of things. And often, if it gets really complicated, I grab someone like you and I say, "I don't know what I'm doing. Let's do
Sure.
this." But at a minor level, it's really not a problem. And I know that most large agencies, especially your very large agencies, they're fully integrated. That model, I still feel like there is room for people to be expert practitioners at a segment of integrated marketing and then have operations join forces. But is that necessary? And is it gonna be all integrated agencies going forward?
No, I don't think it's going to be all integrated. I think there's always going to be a place for the very narrow, deep subject matter expert who
Mm,
is engaged situationally, and there will always be a place for the big kind of monolith,
yep.
you know, stacked agencies.
Mm,
And, I've been on both sides of it where I have clients that are like, "Yep, you absolutely need a fully integrated agency." I have clients that are like, "Listen, I think we'd be great for 50% of this, but here's who I think you should go do this and this and this, and
yeah,
let's
yeah,
bring it all together." So there's no right or wrong answer, but I think from the client side, if I was on the client side of the desk, I wouldn't be opposed to a full service agency. It's just, are they insular or are they still looking outwards?
yeah, and I think too, you mentioned AEO, SEO, etcetera.
Mhm.
We're doing a lot of work these days, sure you are too, looking at what's driving AEO, agentic engine optimization. And I will say, I think this is definitely an evolving science at the moment also.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
because I feel like, you've got your people who say, media placements, that really drives the engines. And yet when I do searches on some of the channels that we have to figure out where AEO is being driven, sometimes it's like just a random, like, association website that happens to aggregate information for an
Yeah.
industry, and that's the big source AEO is pulling from. Sometimes it's Reddit strings that happen to go hog wild, and
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting piece of this that in the advertising and PR world, I don't think we have our hands around that yet.
Oh, no, no. And you know, this gets back to the concept of trust too. I would never trust anybody right now who says they have the answer.
No.
You want somebody who's gonna go work together and figure it out with you. I don't know of anybody who can tell you the answer right now.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's and I think we have to admit how much we are at the mercy of the models and the search engines
Right.
and the big, you know, online players that we can all name, our best advice is really in response to their latest moves. It is not ahead of their latest moves or driving their latest moves. So the in a lot of ways, what people come to you and I for these days is how do we respond to the current environment in a
Mm.
way that forwards our individual needs or goals? And that's, you know, again, oftentimes that's something you got to figure out together.
Yep. Last question. For a leader listening to us today who's trying to decide between PR, advertising, or fully integrated campaign, what are 2 or 3 questions that you would love them to ask themselves up front?
Well, what does success look like?
Mm,
And what ability do you have to sustain the effort? Is this moment in time or is this long term? And then finally, I think it really does come down to is this your umbrella corporate wide initiative or is this a departmental initiative or a product specific initiative? And how does it fit into the larger ecosystem? If you and I had honest answers to those 3 questions,
mhm.
I think we could go pretty far with that person.
I think we're gonna go pretty far no matter what, John. That's just
Yeah.
me.
You hope.
Just
Yeah.
being honest. Yes. John Miller, thanks for joining us today on The Reputation Room. Really appreciate your wisdom and just enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Andy. We'll talk to you soon.